Okay, welcome to the new normal. I'm Brian Morrissey. This is our final episode, at least my final episode. I'm going to be leaving Digiday next week. I'm very sad about that, but very proud of what we've done over the last, I've almost been here 10 years, which is like a long time in media particularly. Basically the whole length of Digiday's existence, except for like a year or so. But very excited for what comes next. Don't know exactly what it is, but before I do go, I want to thank Pierre Bien-Aimé. Pierre is the unseen force behind this and also the Digiday podcast. He's our producer par excellence. So thank you, Pierre, for everything. So we've had like 20 episodes of this show. I mean, we started it right when, the pandemic really hit. And the idea was to look ahead to what comes out of this. And I'm still fascinated by that. And to discuss that in our final episode, no pressure, Scott and Jean Ellen, but I want to bring in Scott Havens and Jean Ellen Cowgill. But before I do, I almost forgot, Jesus. If you're not already a Digiday Plus subscriber, your farewell gift to me, or more specifically to Digiday, can be to join. I mean, you get unlimited stories, exclusive content, premium research, reports and guides, live digital events. I'm a member, I endorse it. And there we go. We got more members. Gina, what about you? All right, we'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that
moment, Brian.
Well, I've got a discount for you if you're not a member, or any of the 40 million people who work for Bloomberg want to use it. They can use TNN at checkout and they get 20% off. Save Mayor Mike some money. It'd be great. All right, let's get to the final episodes. I want to bring in Scott Havens and Jean Ellen Cowgill from Bloomberg. We're going to talk about really interesting endeavor that Bloomberg's had for the last 3 years, I guess now. Formerly known as TikTok. We'll get to the naming problem. But now called QuickTake, and it is now a streaming network. It started as like a Twitter news sort of service. I thought of it as like a Cheddar type thing. I used to see it on the East River Ferry that I used to take to the office that I don't take anymore because I don't go to an office. Anyway, welcome, Scott, Gino.
Thank you, Brian. Excited to be here. Excited to be here for your last new normal.
I know. So Scott, talk to me about I just want to start with innovating within like a large organization. I mean, I know it from within a small organization, sometimes it can be really difficult, even, when there's only not that many people involved in decision making, but it's a lot more complicated in larger organizations. You've been in larger organizations. So, your role as chief growth officer, explain sort of what falls under that and the particular challenges of innovating in a large
organization. Sure. Well, just, this is a new title for me as of the last couple of months. And I think largely when I sat down with Justin to talk a little bit about it, given that there are a few areas that I'm working on that are real growth engines for us, including consumer subscriptions and QuickTake and some of our global partnerships around the world, it felt like a good place, given my background, given the stuff that Justin and I've done both at Atlantic and at Bloomberg, and just my entrepreneurial background to kind of focus a little bit more of my efforts on finding new pockets of revenue and finding new pockets of audience, frankly, for Bloomberg LP. And so the current projects that we're working on, as I mentioned, plus we're looking at a couple of new ones, really all speak to our hardened belief that the way that you grow in a disrupted industry is through invention, frankly, more so than sustainable innovation, but disruptive innovation or invention. Things like the New Economy Forum, things like QuickTake, things like with consumer subscriptions end up adding tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, to the business, and so you've got to take big swings to get out of the hole that we find us in. So that's really what I'm focused on now in this new role. I also am very lucky that I have people like Jean Ellen and Julia Beiser, Lindsay Murphy-Horgan, and others who are frankly better than I am at what they do, and so I can lift up and focus on some of these new things while they more than ably take care of business. but it is hard. We saw, you probably would bring it up anyway, but we saw sad news about Great Big Story, and I don't look at that as like, oh, good, the competitor's out of the way. I look at that as a tale of, like, these guys were doing really great work, and it was hard probably for them to break through within a huge organization, a multi-billion-dollar organization. And I don't know the full story there, and hopefully some of them will land with us and other great players who are trying to do cool stuff in video. But that's
one
a shame.
one of my last assignments was an autopsy to Tim Peterson. So we'll see if Tim, if you're watching, I still want to see it before I leave.
But every time I see that, that's not the first or last project or new innovation that was launched within a large company that didn't make it. I mean, that's probably more the normal course than huge success. And I think the reason we've been able to get to where we've gotten at QuickTake, and Jean Ellen and I and Justin were involved in launching Quartz and City Lab and all these other brands in the past at the Atlantic, is I think we have a good approach on creating some space for these brands, i.e. adding dedicated personnel whose sole focus is to grow this. We don't rely on cross-functional stakeholders for everything. You need to have people who are very passionate, very much understand their job with that business, and then you have to give them both capital and freedom to operate. And one of the great things about Bloomberg has been that Mike is, as an innovator and as an entrepreneur himself, obviously, is very supportive of us taking some swings here, without constraints that you might have within a larger company. So, and we're also private, which makes things a little bit easier than dealing with the public markets and quarterly earnings report.
There's a terminal too, I've heard.
Well, look, we are also very fortunate that we're part of this larger Bloomberg LP with one of the most successful business models of the last 4 decades. It's grown 40 years in a row. It's unbelievable. And it does provide some cushion and safety and capital to do things like QuickTake and expand that into streaming. So, you've got to hire great talent. You've got to give it freedom. You've got to keep it out of the daily bureaucracy if you can.
Yeah.
And you got to give it time. These things take a while. So I think that's part of the formula, and hopefully that's part of the success so far of QuickTake.
Yeah. So Jean Ellen, I want to bring you in to talk a little bit about the opportunity here, because I mean, even an organization like Bloomberg, I know those of us from the outside can be like, oh wow, that must be amazing, but you need to take bets you still have to take bets in certain areas. So let's talk about this area and what is the opportunity here. Back in 2017, it was a different era, but it started as a Twitter network called TikTok, believe it or not. But what are the sort of macro trends going on right now that make QuickTake make sense?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think that you can think about, to oversimplify, you can think about QuickTake as riding two different waves here. The first wave was an opportunity to bring the trusted insight of one of the largest newsrooms in the world to the speed of Twitter. So when we launched, we were specifically created as this 24/7 global video news network for Twitter. And when we talk to our partners on Twitter still today, they will tell you the reason that our videos do well is because you can just tell that the content was created for the platform. It doesn't feel like we're repurposing it. It doesn't feel like it's an afterthought. And there's, as Scott was saying, there's a dedicated team that is thinking about waking up every day and thinking about what's going to work in this universe, and evolve with the platform. We've had a close relationship with Twitter to understand where they're going and how we can continue to evolve with them. So, wave one for us was really building a social first video network. Wave two is now streaming. And we've been watching the trends in the OTT space now for several years. We've seen how those trends are accelerating, especially right now, given everything that's going on in the world. And when we look at what other players are doing in the streaming space, it feels like what they were doing on cable. Like in the same way that what people were putting out on Twitter, it felt like a repurposing. I think a lot of what you see from the traditional players still feels like the talking heads of a different era. And we believe that we can take from a lot of the storytelling best practices of Netflix and others in the entertainment space, documentaries, sort of the rise of the docuseries, and bring that over to the pace of 24/7 global video network. So I think it will look different from what you are, what you're used to from a business news network or a traditional cable news network.
So strategically, explain why you don't just do this off Bloomberg TV. I mean, Bloomberg TV already has a big footprint, right? Not gigantic, but it is a big enough footprint. And you already have the talent, you already like baked in. It clearly needs to, like anyone who's tied to an analog distribution model needs to innovate. So why not just, why isn't Bloomberg TV QuickTake, I guess?
Yeah, I think the answer is one of audience. So we really see this launch in November as the launch of Bloomberg's second global video network. And the two networks can be complements to one another. So Bloomberg Television, you're right, will continue to innovate. And with the recent launch of BTV Plus, it has certainly entered into the streaming space. But it really is for a core markets and finance audience. It's serving those terminal users and also the broader kind of finance markets community. Whereas Bloomberg QuickTake can really reach a much larger audience of rising leaders and professionals across sectors. So, we think of this as a group of modern leaders and professionals who are worldly, ambitious, discerning. We want to cover their entire world. We want to go far beyond.
They've never seen the terminal.
Correct.
Most of them.
Right. And and if they did, they wouldn't necessarily. It'd be too in the weeds for them. They wouldn't want the terminal, right? They want something that is created for them, and we think we have the tools to create it for them.
And I just to double down back on your original question, Brian, I also think it speaks to setting yourself up for success organizationally, and with putting the right talent in the right place. Bloomberg TV does a wonderful job of serving the core audience that it was built to serve. There was no way that they could continue to do that and also pick up the kind of time and effort required to nail a second network for a broader audience around the world. It's impossible. And so we really needed to build out a separate unit that collaborates and draws upon the experience and infrastructure of Bloomberg Television that we built all over the world, but also has its own DNA and experience and personnel.
Okay, so how big is the dedicated team now for QuickTake?
Sure. So we're just over about 100 video producers, editors, and related staff. And then, as Scott noted, we're drawing upon the infrastructure of BTV and also the reporting of the larger Bloomberg newsroom. So we're really taking from that, 2,700 journalists and analysts across 120 countries and turning all of that reporting into video with the dedicated team.
So how do you sort of balance that? Because you want to be efficient and you want to use everything you have to your advantage. And I would guess from the outside, a very big advantage is 2,700 journalists all over the world. It's a big one. But at the same time, you probably both know from your previous experience, like you need to have something where people are getting up and going to sleep and thinking about and held accountable for the success of this thing. Otherwise, if it's people's fifth job, it's just not going to happen. I always say, I was like, what's the budget dedicated to this? If there's no budget, I'm like, this isn't serious. Let's not talk about it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly why we have a dedicated team who is really drawing upon, looking at that larger newsroom as this incredible treasure trove of information and insight, and then thinking about, okay, how do we take this and translate it for our audience, right? What does that look like? And how can we focus in on the things that are important to them? And frankly, what should stay on the cutting room floor? Like what things are right for the markets finance audience of BTV, but not right for this audience.
Yeah. So from like a programming perspective, explain the differentiation, right? I mean, because like I could see like the danger of it becoming a mishmash, in like the search for synergies. It's like, oh, well, Business Week, which has its own ethos, really. It's like they've got, cover story. We've got to like, we're going to do something off that. And then, oh, well, there's this thing going on Bloomberg TV. And like, like, how do you, like, what makes a quick take programming versus just it being a mishmash of different stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that we just re-anchor every time on the audience. We've done a ton of audience research, surveys, interviews to really understand this modern leader and modern professional and what they care about right now. And our goal is to really look at the world through the lens of what they want to understand, both in the office and outside, in terms of their passions, in the ways that they see themselves as citizens of the world, and really use that as the lens through which we translate all of the different places we could go for great, as you're saying, great information within Bloomberg. I also think it's worth noting that when we talk about Business Week or Bloomberg Green or a lot of these other major initiatives or sub brands within Bloomberg, we see those as essentially franchises that we can then bring to life through the channel, right? So that we're providing our audience with a lot of variety, but you still have Bloomberg QuickTake as the master brand over all of it.
So is it less mobile and social than, I mean, because like, how are you gonna like, I get like wanting to, I get the pitch that you need to create a different type of content for a phone and stuff like this. And like, look, Quibi is Quibi. But at the same time, Quibi launched without being able to watch this stuff like on a TV. And it turns out like a lot of people like to watch stuff on TVs.
Yeah.
But you're kind of creating content for two very different experiences.
Right. And here, I think the fact that we did launch on Twitter first and have learned a lot about what works on social and also what doesn't work on social is really valuable, because the temptation, I think, would be to just take from everything that we're creating for this new streaming channel and cut it down and throw it up on Twitter, for example, right? Or throw it out on various social channels. The learnings of the past, 2.5 years, we can go back to and say, okay, we know that there are things that don't work on Twitter, and we know what our audience is expecting from us on social, and we can continue to serve them with that great content and make it more of a relationship back and forth, so that audiences can expect from us the longer form experience for the bigger screen on their TV at home, and also expect that we're going to be taking the right shorter insights that are right for them when they're dipping in and out of their phones.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about the distribution. Where is it going to be available?
Sure. So the channel will be available primarily in two different ways. One, we're completely redesigning the Bloomberg Media OTT app to essentially create two pathways. So you come into the app, and if you are a markets finance professional looking for BTV, you can go down that route. And if you're looking for a broader view of the world, broader business community, you can go down the Bloomberg QuickTake route. So every place that our app is available, it will be, which means that we actually have an installation base at launch, which of course, seeing some of the challenges of recent launches is very beneficial. Separately, we also have negotiated partnerships across a whole host of free ad-supported providers, as well as connected TVs, to be able to provide QuickTake as a channel there, so that if you're clicking through the channels on your smart TV, you find us there alongside everybody else.
Okay.
One of the advantages of having Bloomberg TV as legacy in a 50-person strong media distribution team all over the world is that we've got deals in place with almost everybody for Bloomberg Television, and with a lot of these negotiations that are from everywhere from Africa to Australia to Eastern Europe to Canada and Mexico and Latin America. We've got paper in place, and so is in a long-standing relationship. So it's more of a, adding QuickTake to the mix versus starting from scratch. Again, another advantage for QuickTake is that we're not starting from ground zero in distribution either, which is helpful.
Right. I mean, like, how big of an, I mean, it is launching, and maybe I'm wrong, like, it seems like it's launching a little late into these streaming wars. I mean, there's a lot of options out there. My friends, Cheddar, I mean, they're available on gas stations worldwide, maybe. I think it's just national.
I don't know. I think we're actually, you're right that we've been talking about the streaming wars now for, the coined term, the streaming wars exists fully, right? But I think we're actually entering into a next phase, just given the acceleration that we've seen this year, the pace of cord cutting that has occurred even over the second quarter, third quarter of this year. I think that if you look back at the history of television, there are a lot of moments where we might have said we were at the height of TV, and actually we would laugh at that now and say we were really just beginning the journey.
Brian, I was going to say that you brought up Cheddar, and we have tremendous respect for what John has built, and I think John really was aimed pretty squarely again at Bloomberg TV and CNBC, trying to recreate in a more efficient way and for a younger audience a chronicler of the markets, and I think, and that's great, and that's a great position, and it worked out, I think, well. We're inventing something new that really we believe truly, like, honestly, does not exist, which is not a stocks and sports platform. It's a much broader business in information platform for these modern leaders, and so therefore there really isn't anything like that on traditional or on streaming, and so we think the opportunity is grand, and we've all seen the pricing. Those of us in the market, we've seen the pricing, the supply and demand economics here. There's just not a lot of OTT inventory available on premium networks such as QuickTake, and so we think there's a ripe opportunity, and frankly, there's a lot of white space right now. Even though there's so much battle going on around entertainment, we're not entering that fray. I think that's getting saturated with some major players, as we know.
Yeah. The business opportunity is pretty straightforward, right? Yeah. I mean, this is one area where the ad model makes total sense. I know when John launched Cheddar, he was telling me he was going to, it's all subscriptions. I'm not selling ads ever again in my life. It's like, come on, John. You'll be back to selling ads.
Yeah.
Sure enough, he did, because I mean, the like you said, there's a lot of money still going into streaming, and there's a lot of like crap, I guess, for lack of to use a technical term, in the streaming ad inventory world. I mean, there's a lot of people selling stuff that's like, no,
exactly.
It's not what people think they're buying.
I think that's been a real important point in conversations with our advertising partners, is that we can provide them with a brand safe environment. They know what they're getting, and they can also align with franchises and stories that are important to their brand, the kinds of stories they want to be alongside. So I think that has been a really unique proposition. And to Scott's point, to double down on what he was saying, I think a lot of what we think of as business television today really is markets television, and is covering more of the, we've coined the term internally, stocks as sport, right? And that's not what QuickTake is setting out to be. It's really looking at the world through the lens of business and what business can tell us about what's happening in the world, and also helping leaders and professionals be citizens of the world. That's what we've heard they want.
So there's no stock ticker at all times.
Not likely.
Not in the way that you've seen it on more of the market's competitors, for sure.
Okay. So what's the size of audience that you need to get to for something like this? I mean, because like CNBC is like famously, and perhaps even Bloomberg TV, they don't draw that many people for how big of a business they are.
No, I mean, I think this is where the cross-platform nature of our audience is helpful, because we can, help our advertisers to reach their audience wherever they are. We have built up an audience of over 50 million for QuickTake across our different social channels, and we want to make use of that to introduce the channel to that audience. Some of them will only consume us on Twitter, and that's great, that's fine. But we think we can create a relationship that takes us from social to streaming and back again, and really think about the size of our audience across all of these channels, because there's advertising opportunity.
But the most lucrative advertising, the monetization, the most lucrative is going to be on a TV streaming, not like the little Twitter ads, right?
Yeah. Well, and also I think, there's so much that when we are talking to advertisers that they're still learning and testing, right? In terms of like what their video everywhere play is, what their OTT play is. And so we want to be a partner to them on that journey.
Yeah.
Go on, Scott.
I was just going to say, Brian, I think we also believe, again, not to like overplay this hasn't been done before, an invention, but, Bloomberg, CNBC in particular, in the business sort of finance space, the market space, do have, because of the audiences that watch, have incredible CPMs and in many cases incredible economics. And then you've got the mass plays, the CNNs and BBCs of the world that have huge audiences, but probably lower CPM, sometimes direct response advertising. We think with the business channel like this, for a modern, that's really targeted on this modern leader, you kind of get best of both worlds, where you can scale audience to millions and millions of executives who are broader than just following the markets. But they are the demographic that the leading brands of the world want to reach, and they're willing to pay for that. So we think that in this case, being kind of in the middle, if you will, is not a bad place. It's not a place where you lose. It's a place where you can win.
Okay. So this is not, I mean, in a previous era, I would be tempted to say this is Bloomberg TV for millennials. But the millennials are like old now, so. But you're not like basically positioning it for like, young people who aren't.
It's not. It's something different. It's more about going to a broader suite of leaders across industries, and that includes, kind of this newer generation of leaders who expect something different as a result of watching Netflix. Like they look at cable TV and they think it looks. Yeah. Like my favorite quote from all of the audience research that we've done is, news today just looks so ancient. It's like this idea that like cable TV it just looks old. Like it looks like cable is imported from the 1980s. So
it can look like a Zoom call. So that's comfortable.
Today,
right. Well, that's the modern way now, right? Is everything like a Zoom call.
But just to mention John again, because he's been on he holds the record for the most number of guest slots on the Digiday podcast. But he talked about it being ambient like TV, that like, you go on Netflix and you're going to watch something, you're leaving it and stuff like this. But that like, Cheddar was going to be this like ambient sort of thing. So it's on in the background. It's like, we used to have this when we had offices, but we don't have offices anymore.
Right.
How have you seen, this is a question we got ahead of time, Jean Ellen, how have you seen consumption patterns change? Because we don't have offices to have QuickTake playing in the background at all the time.
Right. I mean, this is where, we think maintaining a strong social presence is important, because a lot of people are just dipping in and out of their phones throughout the day, and we want to be there for them. And I think people are a bit more intentional with what they pull up on their screen. I do think there's still going to be power in the kind of ambient TV model. And I think, we have a strong digital out of home network. We have a strong airport TV presence, which people will get to see again if they ever return to airports.
Are you still on the ferry? I mean, I haven't been on the ferry in 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like, and someday when people get back on the ferry, they'll see us there again. But I think this is where we've been trying to be intentional in the way that we've thought about our programming mix, where when you turn it on in the evening, it will feel more like the kind of documentary style shows that you would more, sit down and really want to watch, and we've seen some of that from cable players in the past with like the rise of Anthony Bourdain and other programs like that. But I think there's a next generation of that type of programming that can really be developed, and that's where we want to invent something special and new.
It's not going to be weird product demos, is it?
No.
Those do well though on social, but
I know that, and I think John knows that too.
John does know that. There is a downside to ambient too, which is very real. I think, and again, this is not, we don't want to talk about John. This is not the John podcast, but the other side of ambient is disengaged, in my view, and I think advertisers today, they want to make sure that the money they're spending with you is with an audience that's paying attention and actually affects a purchase or changes brand perception or whatever. And so you can fill up tens of millions of ad slots by having someone leave on a channel, as I do during the day, for 8 hours, but actually is anybody watching? And I think we don't want to be ambient, we want to be engaged, with our audience on all these platforms. So
yeah, although we spend a lot of time filling our tanks in America. I want to open it up to questions. Always like to have questions. If you want to use the Q&A function, that would be great. We got a bunch ahead of time, so I'll just throw this out. Either one of you can grab this one. Part of Bloomberg's power is its global footprint. What is the target international mix of content for OTT, and is content transferable? I would assume, this being Bloomberg, you're looking at this as a global media opportunity.
Definitely, and taking that starts from the programming, right? Like taking a global viewpoint, thinking about audiences tuning in from around the world, and wanting to showcase what's happening around the world in a way that doesn't feel like it's coming from a specifically American viewpoint. So that starts with the programming. In terms of the channel itself, we will be 24/7. We're kicking off with 10 hours of daily original programming, which is a bit more focused, on a US day. But what we'll be playing overnight is amazing kind of video from the day, including various more evergreen documentaries that can still tell a really compelling story. And we will be rapidly building out our kind of programming wheel over time. So, and Scott, you can speak to, we already are in conversation with distribution partners around the world, including opportunities for translation. So we certainly are looking at this as global from the outset.
Yeah, again, I think if at least one path to securing a financially secure future for a media entity is creating some barrier to entry, some uniqueness and differentiation, we're certainly going to lean into our global footprint. We don't think anyone's serving that particularly, but we also want to lean in to the potential that we can go multi-language and use our relationships all over the world. Through the media distribution group, we have 800 partnerships, and many of them would love to work with us on, QuickTake in Mandarin, QuickTake in Arabic, QuickTake in Spanish, and that is very, very hard to do for smaller VC-backed entities and even big media companies. So we see some real power there in differentiating both on the global programming, but also global partnerships to make it more regional in language and perhaps in content as well.
Okay. This is a big picture question that came in. How do you see the future of the media business?
End stop.
Perilous. If you have any general thoughts on that, let me know.
I'll take a stab first.
All right.
And you can
please do it in 2 minutes.
Yeah. So first of all, I am an optimist. I think we need to. So I feel like it's bright, but we've got to get through the sort of reimagining of the business and focus on areas where there's a business model that works. And so when I think broadly about media, and that could be everything from local news to magazines to TV, networks. There's still a pain period. You know, David Carr talked about the long hallway, the long tunnel until you see the light for media. We're still in it. And I think there's going to be a lot of carcass along the side of the road, and there's going to be incredible innovation. Cheddar and many others, QuickTake, hopefully pushing that forward. But I think we'll settle into a place. And I think the salvation, honestly, is going to be, if there is a salvation, and not everybody's geared up to do this, but one, video and the transfer of wealth from traditional television into like people that are producing for streaming and digital. I think that is just a huge growth area for the next 10, 15 years, because brands want to reach people in mass, and you can be both targeted and mass, and video advertising's, sort of more expensive and lucrative. So it's a better model than display advertising. Love that for those that are playing in that space like we're doing with QuickTake. And then consumers have come along for the ride. Digiday Plus is an example. So is Bloomberg.com or The Atlantic, for that matter, our old stomping ground. Consumers are willing now to pay much more than they were 5 years ago for great content, whether it's music or news and information. And so I feel very bright, because if you have a very balanced, this goes back to the traditional media, if you have balanced consumer revenue and balanced advertising revenue that are sustainable and can be grown, then you actually might have a chance at having a real profitable business model. So I feel bright. I just think we're not through the pain yet.
Yeah. I always like to ask this, what are like a couple of media companies that from the outside, and it's always hard to know the inside, it's always messy, but like from the outside, you're like, yeah, I think they're on to something pretty interesting.
I'll tell you one that, and they're in the news this week, so I was just thinking about them last night. I think what Penske Media just did with MRC, it seems brilliant. And back to my point, they have these great brands. In Hollywood Report. Well, I guess MRC had a Hollywood Reporter. They had Variety, Rolling Stone, all these great brands. MRC had a few brands, but MRC also, as we know through Ozark and other shows they produced, including one of ours, The Shrink Next Door, which is coming, I think, this winter. They have the capabilities in the growing area of video production to bring these two together in this interesting structure. Seems brilliant, because brand equity, content and IP, and then a video production arm. It's hard to say like they're not onto something. And we know that Penske in and of itself have done a really nice job rolling up this business and squeezing profitability, bringing in new talent, like dusting off some of these brands. So I have my eye on those guys. I think Jim and Marty and Pam over at Vox have done some really good stuff too, obviously, and I loved actually bringing New York Mag into the fold, because it brought an entirely different sort of set of content and an understanding of consumer marketing that I think will be really helpful for them as they scale that out. I don't know, who else do you like, Jean Ellen?
Something that's been fun for us as we've been continuing to grow with QuickTake is some of the really great kind of more vertical niche brands and partnering in interesting ways. The more subscription-based brands that then QuickTake can actually act as a new outlet for them that goes beyond the paywall. So, we announced a partnership with The Athletic over the summer. So, it's an opportunity for them to get their talent kind of outside of their subscription without in any way, cannibalizing their subscription model. We have another partnership with The Information. So I think we're going after all the brands that have "the" in front. So any brand, The Information, The Athletic, anybody else with a "the," we're ready to go. But I think that model is really interesting, and I think the relationship between a larger player like a Bloomberg with some of these smaller players that are really focused on a very hyper-specific audience, that's really interesting and could point a way for what the ecosystem looks like in the future in a sustainable way. And of course, as we see, Brian, with you, like, the kind of Substack revolution as well, right? All these independents like coming up. I think for those of us like a QuickTake or a Bloomberg, there's an opportunity to create relationships there that get really interesting when you look at it from the perspective of the entire kind of media industry. So fun stuff.
It's fun. It's like, I was saying this to someone the other day, like media keeps going, it just like bundling and then unbundling and then rebundling. And maybe this is some mini
Very cyclical.
unbundling that just sets the table to be rebundled. I don't know. It's like Waiting for Godot media version. It's my deep thought of my final episode. Another question that we got was, this is kind of related. How will a niche brand be found in an on-demand future? And how should we prepare for this?
Yeah, I mean, we're, as part of our relationships with the various kind of connected TV and free ad-supported players, where we'll exist not as an app, but as a channel on their platform. We are, as part of our partnership, negotiating, promotion of the channel, so that people do know about us. They see us on the home screen. They can find us, and also this comes back again to the benefit of being part of Bloomberg. It's we're niche in the sense that we're a single channel, but Bloomberg is has a vast infrastructure to promote this channel and this launch in a variety of different ways across our platforms. So we will bring the full force of that to bringing the channel to life for audiences and making sure we get that reach.
One of the having now done this for a couple of decades, media, and worked closely with both David Carey, Justin Smith, and a couple other sort of, I think, brilliant marketers. I really see a lot of people doing interesting stuff, content creation, that don't have like a holistic and strategic discovery plan. It's one thing to build a channel or a website or whatever, but if you don't bring in the right marketers, communications experts, and also think about where your audience is, TikTok / QuickTake now, our TikTok, was always built to reach people wherever they are, whenever they are. And so I just see, when I look at some of these brands that are really struggling with discoverability, they're not attacking it with the talent and the broad-based marketing strategies, marketing communication strategies they need to stand out, period. And I think that, so when people ask, I'm struggling to break through, I'm this niche thing, we do really great work, but I've got a tiny audience, it's usually just they haven't thought about that other piece. And I think that is a full court press, right? You've got to have people doing it. And it's not just about paid marketing. In fact, for all the stuff at Bloomberg Media, as well as my experience at Atlantic and Time Inc. and other places, we haven't spent tens or hundreds of millions of dollars on marketing the way, say, a Quibi might. It's more the content, and it's the strategies, and it's the PR, and it's the integration on platforms. Don't complain about Apple News, use it smartly. There's 150 million people there, right? So
one more question that was, how soon after launching as TikTok did you say, oh shit? That's actually from me.
We were first.
No, but I mean,
oh yeah, oh shit, when they came.
When were you like, oh no, this is not gonna hit me?
I will never forget the moment of coming off the subway and seeing this like digital out of home ad for TikTok with a K, and thinking, I wonder if that's going to be an issue.
No, it was New Year's Eve too. The TikTok bought.
That was long.
An ad in Times Square. My mother called and said, "Are you guys marketing this new thing in Times Square?" I was like, "No."
That was long after my subway moment, though, because there was this period there where we were watching the rise of TikTok with a K, recognizing it was.
There's only so much you could be. No, it's with a K. No, it's with a K.
And just ball drop moment on New Year's Eve was literally like the shoe drop moment of, okay.
We got to change the name probably.
Okay, QuickTake I think is a better brand. That's my.
We've settled into.
One question was about the upcoming election, and I'm interested in also how, obviously I now live in Florida. Mike Bloomberg is funneling a lot of money to advertise in Spanish down here. But how are you looking at it with the politics? Politics is eating everything these days. And it seems like the programming definitely does not want to go in the, that's a very well-served market.
Yes. Yeah. And we've heard that from our audiences too. I mean, you say politics is eating everything, but when we talk to our audiences, they're not happy about that.
They're full.
Right? They're full. Yeah, they're done. It's like they've had enough. I mean, they want to stay abreast of what's going on, but they have plenty of resources for that.
Yeah.
And they have questions that remain unanswered about what are the long-term solutions for climate change, or how can I understand what's going on at a societal level? Like, what can I understand about, how this moment in history is going to affect how businesses, compete and play out over the next several years? Those are questions that are not being answered at all by the existing networks. And
it's definitely not like Trump all the time.
That market is served.
Yeah, it's well served. Multi-platform.
Overserved. Yeah.
Okay, a couple of just final questions, and then we can call it a show. One question was, and do you get any sort of? We talked about this a little bit, Jean Ellen, but what do viewers request as far as the types of content that they want?
Sure. I think this comes back to what I was saying. Our audience sees themselves as multifaceted, and they define success not as their net worth, but as the quality of their life, which I think is really actually it has direct implications for what you cover. It means that, yes, we want to go deep on various business questions and uncovering the world of business, but this audience also wants to geek out on the things they love. So they want to know about the business of sports, right? They want to know about the way that the thing they're passionate about happens and how it gets made, and the distribution model behind it, and where it might go in the future. I think I've been so fascinated over the summer by what's going on with the NBA as an example, where it's this nexus of what's happening in culture and society, how we can come up with a totally different way of doing business, right? And also is just the sport itself. And so covering a phenomenon like the NBA in 2020 through the lens of business, I think is a perfect example of the kind of things that our audience wants to geek out over through a lot of different dimensions.
Mm-hmm. One final question before we do go for both of you is, we started the show with what emerges out of this thing. I thought that would be, early next year, but it looks like it's going to stretch even longer. When we do finally emerge from the other side of this, which of the sort of accelerations that we're seeing is going to stick around the most beyond the office stuff?
Yeah. I mean, Scott, I know you go hard on this one. I've heard you make the comparison multiple times now of the death knell of print was the financial crisis, and this is the death knell of cable. So I don't know if you want to, I think those are your basic talking points on that one. If you want to say more.
I do feel like there's some real parallels here. I happen to be trying to build another brand, Condé Nast Portfolio, back when the Great Recession hit. And that was a model that was really built on print, really to pay the bills for Annie Leibovitz photo shoots and Michael Lewis cover stories. And it was actually a great product that had a little bit of unfortunately, a traditional model to support the expense side. And then we got hit by the recession, and print never really recovered. It felt like the acceleration to digital picked up, and I feel like we're seeing that now. So consumers are starting to have the time, and the options are there for trying streaming. I think that we've seen a terrible year for traditional cable and satellite providers on cord cutting, and I think that has just sped up that inexorable trend, which then shifts a tremendous amount of economic value, to follow Mary Meeker's gap between engagement and revenue, we know this is a leading indicator. So there's this big transition there. So that trend is here to stay. It's just picking up speed, and with 5G and other technological enhancements and improvements, you can imagine that we'll see that continue on for a while. So that's a big one, clearly. I think the e-commerce one is huge. Now, we don't play deeply in here, we cover it, but there are hundreds, if not billions of people who have been, billions of people, definitely not hundreds of millions, who have been trapped in their houses and have turned to Amazon and other places, to get products delivered to their home, and brands that were started before COVID, but have really leaned into using social media to create a D2C brand and serve, some sort of consumer need. And so that's been a huge one that's not going to stop. Retail is in deep trouble, I think.
I just feel like all of our habits are completely up for grabs. Like I keep thinking back to, you may remember there was an iconic kind of article that came out about how Target, the company, always went after pregnant women because coming out of having a child, like all of your habits change. And so if you can get in that moment and be there for them, then you have a lifelong customer. And I feel like we are all in that exact position right now. All of our habits are up for grabs. All of the ways that we, like our default stores, our default ways of shopping, our default ways of getting information or turning on the television, they're just different because we're living differently right now. And so I think a lot about just like think about your day-to-day life. What are the habits that you've picked up or started to pick up as a result of, Brian, you said like, it's not just about work from home. It's the fact that you are home. Maybe you tried delivering your groceries and you realized it was really convenient and you're never going back to the store.
Never.
So, it'll be really interesting to see how every single one of these trends is the starting gate for so many businesses of the future.
Yeah, I agree.
One last point on that, which I think is also really important. Let's talk about diversity and inclusion here, right? This moment with this administration, probably, and during a pandemic, and increased horrible, deaths resulting from some of the things that happened between African Americans and police, have created an entirely new effort towards understanding, social justice, racial justice, and equality. And where D&I was, I think, part of every modern company's agenda, I think right now, and I don't see this changing no matter what goes on with the pandemic or this moment. We've kind of hit that inflection point, and companies like Bloomberg and many others are really, really investing in this conversation and in this moment to transform their companies, to be more inclusive, to be more thoughtful, to bring in more people that look like their customer base. And I've never seen anything like it in my 25-year career, and it's a really great thing. And that's not going to change.
Yes, I mean, hopefully actions follow the words. I think they should this time.
I think they will this time. Yeah.
Excellent. We're going to leave it there. Scott, Jean Ellen, thank you so much. Appreciate you being my final guest on the new normal.
Thanks for having us. Good luck in your new business.
Yes.
Thank you. I look forward to someday being back in, one, living in New York, two, taking the ferry to an office maybe, and seeing QuickTake.
Excellent.
And thank you all for joining us. Thanks for being part of this last 20 or so weeks. Really appreciate it. Always appreciate your support over the years. And if you're not already a Digiday Plus member, please do join. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.